Hello and welcome to the March 2019 Sunshine Summit. My name is Heather and I am your host. This week, in association with Geeks Rising, we are bringing to you a week of live streams to recognize and celebrate connections. Well, this is day 4, our second guest for the day. Earlier, we were joined by Win Charles. Yesterday, we were joined by Steph Fuccio. And the day before, we were joined by... Oh, now. The pressure. Good job. We had Ducky and we had Jim Collison from Home Gadget Geeks. And on day 1, we were joined by Csomo from the Varmints podcast. Today, I am super grateful to be closing out today with Mark Diaz, the host of Mark's Movie Collection. Welcome to the Sunshine Summit, Mark.
Thank you so much. I'm very honored, very pleased to be here. I'm sure there's awesome slang for it, being so pleased, but I am drawing a complete blank. A little nervous, but very happy.
Yeah. I got caught up in the excitement in the introduction there, so I'm sorry about that. Dean said that memory. Yeah, it's been tricky. There's a lot to keep track of this week, but we're here to celebrate connections. We're here to have fun, and it's really great to see people in the live chat. Liberty Dude says, party in the sunshine. Whoop, whoop. And
Indeed.
Steph is here. Good morning from Shanghai. Hey, Steph. And Luke said, Mark equals IT guy and dad.
That is correct.
Yeah. I had to wear black today. I just wanted to sort of get that kind of feel like, yeah, I wanted to kind of rock out and party with you and celebrate because you've got this amazing connection with movies and we have an amazing connection because we connected through the Podcastage Discord server. It's an amazing way that people have come together and it's an amalgamation of people from all different walks of life because of Bandrew and his Podcastage YouTube channel. And then we get to know each other in there and we talk about music and movies, and movies is kind of the main theme of today. Yeah.
Super excited.
Yeah. I went back and had a look, and we've had a lot of discussion in the movie channel on the server, and you've posted quite a bit in there, and it's awesome to see that. I love that you're sharing there and that we have that place to talk about the movies that we've watched. In Mark's movie collection, you're talking about ones that are in your collection. So you watch movies outside of that, but in the podcast, you're talking about ones that are specifically in your collection.
Yeah, so I have a dumb amount of things in general. I have a lot of things, but one of the things that I have that my wife and I, when we got married, we obviously joined forces with was movies. Mm-hmm. So there's a flight case. You can't really see it. It's like right back there. And it's about half full of no sleeve disc DVDs. And then I have in the entertainment center the movies that I like the special ones mm-hmm. that I wanted to keep the jewel box for and all that. And I'm like, I need to go through these. I haven't seen them all because, like I said, a lot of them, a good chunk came from my wife, mm-hmm. but I've seen most of them, and I kind of wanted to go back over it.
Yeah.
And it fulfilled maybe two needs because I had kind of through life circumstance and things fallen out of podcasting or even creating in general. And to get back in, I said, well, what do I have and what can I do on my own terms, like mm-hmm. with myself, not necessarily dependent on anybody externally. And I said, well, hey, I have a ton of movies and I love movies. And I feel that I have the ability, the vocabulary to talk about them a little better. Yeah. So I did it. And I also did like Mark's music collection. I saw somebody talking about the records right here. Have a lot of records too, and CDs and digital music as well. But yeah, I did some episodes of that, but I didn't really feel that I had the vocabulary. Like I didn't study music or anything like that. Whereas I've maybe attempted to study at film. Mm-hmm. So it felt more comfortable pursuing that.
Yeah. So on that note, that kind of brings into the theme of then Mark's movie collection isn't your first podcast. Like you mentioned, there is Mark's music collection, but there's an origin story to how podcasting came about for you. And
yes. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go.
Okay. Sorry to cut you off. But this actually started for me around 2012, maybe. I was hanging out with a couple friends and we were playing The Dig, right? Which I don't know if everyone is familiar with it, but The Dig is one of the LucasArts point and click adventures, right? And there's a whole series of those games that are still wildly popular, and that format of game has made a comeback. I'm assuming a few people have seen Bandrew playing on his stream when he did play the games and things like that.
Yeah.
And those were built on what was called the Scum engine, which came about in the creation of Maniac Mansion, which I know that you've played. And it's the script creation utility for Maniac Mansion. So Scum with 2 M's. So we were just kind of throwing the ball around like, oh, this is fun. And we were riffing on the game. And they're like, well, what if we make like a stream, podcasts, episodic YouTube kind of thing? And I was like, yes, we can call it the Scumbags. And I went that day and I bought the domain, and we made we made one video on an indie point and click called Grimsfield, which is a really interesting small game, solo made by an artist. Gentleman was a digital artist. I don't have his name in front of me. This is also from like 2012, 2013, so it's been a while.
Yeah.
But I went out and I bought his game, for the $5 or $8 or whatever it was, and we played through it. One friend on Skype, Mike, and then my friend Josias with me in the larger room, kind of over my shoulder as I drove the game, and it was a lot of fun. But a lot of various life circumstances kind of came in, and we weren't able to maintain that. But having that experience and buying the microphones and setting up the streaming computer and stuff like that was very cool. So I kind of kept doing it. I ended up starting a music podcast with a friend of mine, Lewis, called Crafting the Groove, which is also hosted on scumbags.com. And that's also very old, and we were really figuring it out, both of us. I think that our last episode there was actually really, really good, hilariously enough, but it's the last one that we did. And we really don't, I think we need to reach out and kind of pick that back up, because it was definitely fun to do.
Yeah.
But we also did some NES Classic videos. So we did like 6 hours of NES Classic or something. And those are on YouTube, and nobody watched them, and the sound was bad. And these are all learning experiences, as I like to think of them. I don't think I'm the smartest. I don't think I'm the best at anything right out the gate, but I'm definitely good at learning from my mistakes, because I go over them incessantly.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things.
Yeah, I think that's amazing that you do that, and it comes through in what you do, because, like you said, you might not have the vocabulary around the music, but then you've developed a vocabulary around the movies side of things. I love the way that you describe the Scumbags on your website as well. You mention about the acronym, and just the language in that sentence that you use is amazing. I'll just pull it up so I don't get confused. You've got tech people love acronyms, and that, dear reader, is a fantastic acronym for Scumbags or Scum. And I just think that's awesome that you've thought about it that way, and that's what you bring to the Mark's Movie Collection podcast as well. It's really awesome. Catch you later, Adam. He's off to work, but he'll catch the replays.
See you, Adam.
But yeah. In audio too, you've learned a lot, and I think that's awesome about the Discord server and having that place to ask questions and learn. And it's been a journey there, and you use Reaper, and that's what your main way of editing things has been, and there's been a whole learning journey with that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even get to the half of it. So actually, after that whole thing with Lewis, I started another podcast with 2 other friends of mine who are game developers. So we did a game development podcast, and we did like maybe half a year, maybe 6 months of those, and those were called weekly deliverables. And in terms of podcasting live and even remotely, I learned a lot real quick, because I made a lot of mistakes.
Yeah.
But that's where I really got into Reaper, because we would record in person, and I would have all the 3 files, and be able to go over it and EQ and do effects and all those things. And that podcast, actually, life events as well. I had a son. And, the other 2 guys have a lot going on as well. And it's hard to sit down for an hour and then still have to go over the editing and stuff like that. And I also learned about production a lot during that podcast, because we had some really, really good episodes and some really bad ones. And the common denominator there, or the factor there, was preparation. So we've been talking about bringing it back up, but with a lot more work involved in the back end. And it's been daunting for everyone involved, because we all have a lot going on.
It is hard to manage all of the things, as well as something like that takes a lot as well. The coordination of schedules amongst you all, with all the different activities you've got going on, fitting it around families, and families are amazing. So thank you to yours for helping you to be here today. And then the production process that goes in afterwards. And when you've got more than one person, it is a lot harder to edit and put that all together. And especially if
It
they
is
go for
extremely
a long form ones, which yours are, and mine are short. And I have that that was the plan for mine, to keep them short because of a time limitation. Yeah.
So Steph in the chat asked, are there any online resources that you recommend to learn how to use Reaper? I would, the way that I learned it, and I mean, this might be a little different for me because I work in tech, I'm very accustomed and comfortable being on a computer, was I said, I want to do X, and then I Googled exactly how to do X Reaper. And then from there, I built a library of knowledge.
Yeah. There is the Reaper Mania, I think they're called, and they have a YouTube channel there where it goes into detail. There's been people like Mike Delgadio, I think, who have done their own tutorials on it. So yeah, YouTube's an amazing resource. Google's an amazing resource to be able to find things, and you've managed to build your own repository of the collected information together, which is awesome.
I'll just point out as a hot tip that the SWS extension for Reaper is wonderful because it has the ability to master to a certain loudness, which the measurement is LUFS, and that's not in Reaper by default. So it's really nice to have.
Okay. So how would they go about finding that?
I think it's SWS extension or SWS dash extension.
Okay. Hopefully we haven't lost you. You good?
Oh.
We're good.
Yeah, I'm here.
That's cool. Steph said, lol, yep, you're proficient at the internet. That was a phrase my husband found in a job once, which was quite funny. And racing, I know how to use the internet. Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you had Scumbags, the dynamic of that has changed, and Mark's movie collection is there, and that's where people can find it, and it's on podcatchers, places people can find it there as well. But going to your passion for films that you've connected, you got your collection and your wife, and you joined your collections together. You've just wrapped up season 1, and you finished it with one of your favorite movies, which was American Graffiti.
Yes, that is correct. That is definitely my favorite movie ever.
Yeah. That is a powerful thing to have something that stuck out that much for you. I think that movies have this, it's like an escape sometimes. It's like there are other lives and there are other things we can see and experience through movies, and we can relate to them or have a different experience by watching them. And American Graffiti stuck out for you. And I don't want to go into the why of that because I want people to listen to the episode and I want them to share their experiences. But if anyone in the chat has seen American Graffiti, let us know what you thought. You've also covered other films as well in season 1, like 300, the 1974.
I tried to cover 300.
You tried to.
That was a fun story.
Yeah, tried to cover that one. The 1974 Gone in 60 Seconds?
Yes.
St. Elmo's Fire, Spider-Man 3, Spy Game, Darkman, Pitch Black, Swordfish, The Bourne Identity, The Frighteners, Top Gun.
Yeah.
Some good ones. And Ronan, said Luke. He reminded me of that one.
Yes.
And Brick.
Very observant, that one.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've seen you mention before that you do a lot of research and you take a lot of notes while you're watching the films. And that's really important because of the time it takes to watch a film and to collect your thoughts and then to be able to put this podcast together. So do you have like a notebook while you're watching it that you jot them down as you're going? Yeah.
Yes. And it is not the most efficient way to do it, but it feels the most organic, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I have a graduate degree. I went to school for many years. And one of the things that I found was that in lecture, if I wasn't handwriting notes, it was gone.
Okay.
So I have a decently good memory for things, but handwriting them really helps.
Yeah.
And then being able to go back and look at it, which I didn't do much for school, but I actually do a lot more for the movies, kind of helps me figure out where my thoughts were, what direction I was leaning here and things like that. But it does extend the watching time because I do hit pause. So it actually takes me maybe double the amount of time to watch a movie doing it that way.
Yeah. But you connect with so many things throughout the watching of the film that adds the richness to the podcast that you present. And I love just the format of it. When you come in, it's kind of like you've basically recorded it live. We could, like, at least we don't have the time waiting while you go and watch the film, I guess. But you push pause and you then come back to the podcast and do your thoughts, and you've got the little audio bumper there between the two. And I love that. And I love how there are things that you specifically leave in when you're editing too. And it's just this it's this, you've got a great way of presenting your thoughts on the film, and so I really enjoy that about your show.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, those are things that I learned in the production for the Weekly Deliverables podcast. We would run little jokes and gags here and there, notably from the Podcastage channel, the box throw and the stickers gag. And the, hello microphones, I have another Earthling review for you. Like things like that type of gag. That's a thing that I've seen around, but seeing other people that I know or realizing that it works when I do it, kind of solidified that as a thing in my head.
Sometimes I'm sitting there and I'm like, you're really going to do that right now? That's cool. And it just makes me laugh and smile, and then we carry on. And I'm just going to ask this in case anyone hasn't listened to the podcast yet, but do you watch trailers before you watch a film?
I don't.
Okay. And do you read...
I try not to.
Yeah. And do you read reviews about other people's reviews about a film before you watch it?
Especially if it's a film I want to see, I will consume nothing at this point, because trailers have become spoiler machines, and there are movies that are literally the whole movie's in the trailer at this point.
Yeah. So you like to go in with a clean slate, just your own... So you take your own interpretation away from it.
If I'm on the fence, like maybe I'll watch this movie, then yeah, I might look at a non-spoiler review or something like that, or I'll talk to people like, hey, what'd you think? Don't spoil it, but what did you think?
Yeah. And on that note, I think you listened to a podcast that was talking about American graffiti, and they had different opinions to you, or they portrayed it in a different light, and perhaps you didn't agree with them. I can't remember what the podcast was called, but you're pretty passionate about that film, for example. So after the fact, how do you find that when you are aware of other things that people and other opinions on things that you're passionate about?
So I think the one that I got the deepest dive into with other people's opinions was Spy Game.
Okay.
Because I didn't watch Spy Game when it came out. I watched it kind of afterwards, and I'm like, this movie is amazing. I genuinely love that movie.
Yeah.
And it was like very like lukewarmly reviewed, and I disagreed with a lot of what the professional critics had to say. They're like, it's boring, but I didn't find it boring. I found it very engaging. But I think it's also similarly to Ronin, where maybe Ronin has this like quiet introspectiveness to it, in that it's an older style of movie, but it maybe understands that. Spy Game was like an updated Tony Scott version of that older type of movie, so it had a lot of modern touches, like the camera was very mobile and things like that, and that may have confused a few people. And then maybe people didn't agree necessarily with the rationale or the morality of the characters. But ultimately I did. So that also really subjectively changes your feelings on a movie.
I agree. And I think your previous experiences and what you sort of become aware of will impact how you think and feel about a film, whether you've seen the older versions and a new version comes out and you've only got maybe the new version to base your opinion off of, or like if you've got the context of what happened before, it can add a whole other level to your experience of something. And it's amazing to me because I also don't usually watch trailers. I don't read reviews. I may if I am a little bit skeptical or I don't know what it could be, what I could be getting into. But I like to go in with a clear mind and my own thoughts on it. And then even afterwards, I don't really look at too much, just in case. I'm happy with my opinion on it, I guess. And what I like about connecting with your show and with talking about it in the server is that it doesn't matter who has what opinion on it. We've all got something to share or our experience of it, and we can experience it in a different way. And I think that's what you open up the dialogue with, asking for people to share their experiences with what they found.
I genuinely love to hear what people thought of a movie, especially if it disagrees with what I thought. But my immediate follow-up is why?
Yeah. Yeah. To learn more about why they have that opinion and why they think that way. Yeah. Luke,
yeah, exactly.
Luke said, any chance of the French Connection or Chinatown reviews in the future?
Absolutely. I love Chinatown. And I think I have French Connection somewhere back there. I might not, so then it doesn't make it. But if I don't have Chinatown, I will go out and buy the most expensive Criterion Collection Chinatown just to make it work, because I absolutely love Chinatown.
Awesome. Regen, Dean from Regen Racing said, "What's the worst movie you've seen?"
The worst movie I've seen has to be Manos Hands of Fate. Manos Hands of Fate is widely regarded as the worst movie, but then there's some dispute with Plan 9 from Outer Space, and I assure you, Plan 9 from Outer Space is truly awful. But Manos Hands of Fate is the worst movie I've ever seen, probably. Although there's a new gentleman who's kind of coming up for that title, and his name is Neil. Oh, let me look up his name. Neil. But he's Neil Breen, right? Okay. So I'll type that in the chat. He's a truly awful filmmaker, and he's really coming hard for that title.
Oh gosh. Have you seen Birdemic?
I have seen clips of Birdemic. I really wanted to go see the Riff Tracks event of Birdemic, but I did see Riff Tracks Manos Hands of Fate and Riff Tracks Plan 9 from Outer Space. Okay. And I promised you they're worse.
Okay, that's good to know. We can avoid those ones. So what does attract you to a film just off of making you want to go see it?
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
That's a genuinely difficult question that I've never even considered myself.
Okay, we can come back to that. I would say that,
yeah, I would say that the majority of films that I like are some type of science fiction, because that's a genre of book that I really appreciate. I also like spy movies. I also have read a lot of spy books. Mm-hmm. And I'm not really there are certain things that I won't see, like Buried with Ryan Reynolds and Room with Brie Larson. I will never see. I have a bit of claustrophobia myself, and when I'm watching a movie and I'm really engaged, I'm genuinely feeling similar things. I'm reacting to the situation as if I was there.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the same vibe I get when I'm reading a book. I'm reading a book, but I'm actually seeing it as a movie almost.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those things where there are just movies I won't see because reasons, emotional or otherwise, like trauma, essentially. Like, now as I have a child, it's hard for me to see, TV shows and movies where children get hurt or killed or anything like that, because I can't help but put myself in that place.
Yeah.
But I do watch maybe a disproportionate amount of action and science fiction movies. So, I mean, that might be normal for the American male population, roughly, but it is what it is. I don't really watch too many other movies, although, I've been kind of, as I've grown older, my taste has changed and matured and things like that. And I've come to appreciate more artistic films or dramas. Like I saw Mother by Darren Aronofsky, and Mother was very controversial, but I think that Mother is one of the most movies. The Mother is almost the most movie a movie can be, right? Mm-hmm. It uses the medium to its fullest, and it's a crazy movie, but it is fully a movie in ways that other movies aren't, in ways that following Meg Ryan around with a camera is not.
Okay.
That being said, I do have a list of 3 favorite rom-coms, and I think Meg Ryan's in one of them. And that's IQ with Meg Ryan and Tim Robbins, which is maybe my number 1 favorite. And then John Cusack is in my number 2 and my number 3, which are High Fidelity and Grosse Pointe Blank. Not in that order.
Okay. Yeah. Going back to what you said about being absorbed in something, I get that way too. It's like immersing yourself in it and feeling the things and going through it as well. I appreciate that having a child and not being able to watch some of those things that hit too close to home, or topics that might have the elements of things, of trauma-related things. And Liberty Dude asked, having a child, what do you think of the movies being produced for children's consumption, which is kind of taking that on a different route for what's available for them?
I don't know. There are a number of children's movies that are actually good movies. A lot of those being under the Pixar label. I will say that I really thought that Incredibles 2 was a beautiful movie. I think that they push the envelope in terms of cinematography and lighting in the 3D space that they use. But Coco hit me right in the feels. Like I was crying maybe 80% of that movie.
Gosh.
Because I knew how things were going and things like that. And it's a lot about family, and it's a Latin American thing or Hispanic thing and things like that. And that really resonated with me in a big way because of how the characters were in the movie. And I know that I am not that way, and I felt weirdly guilty. It was a lot. It was a lot to take in. But not only that, but it was a wonderful, beautiful movie.
Dean said, "Hit me right in the feels." Awesome quote. See, here's an amazing way of describing things, everybody. I love the way he does that. Steph said, "Did I hear Chinatown?" And she had a laugh. And she loves John Cusack, but more of a say anything gal.
I mean, yeah, Say Anything is definitely a movie, but sometimes looking back at the movies of that era, especially some of the John Hughes movies, it's just like, ooh, that wasn't good. That wasn't okay. They Twitter, I think, calls them problematic now, and I think with reason.
Okay. Yeah. I think just saw another one. Here's a Kiwi movie that I'd put up for the worst movie, Black Sheep, and it's a horror movie. Yeah, I've seen Black Sheep. I think we've made other better movies than that one. Have you?
So, let me ask you something about Black Sheep.
Mm-hmm.
Was it bad knowing that it was bad?
That is a good question. Was it bad knowing that it was bad? I think that we have this thing of taking the Mickey out of ourselves, and whether that played into Black Sheep, I don't know, but there are other New Zealand films, and we've done a lot of dark ones too. I noticed Out of the Blue is one that's it's more of a based on a true story type thing, but yeah. I want to know why Dean thinks it is. It was meant to be horror, but tried to be comedy, and obviously he thinks it was a total fail. Yeah.
I mean, it's definitely possible that it failed, but I think intent is really important. So there's a couple of notoriously bad movies that are made self-aware.
Yeah.
And with a wink to the camera, and they are, off the top of my head, Wolf Cop, which was Canadian, and it is a truly terrible movie, but it is so funny.
Yeah.
And Thanksgiving was made on an extremely low budget. But the turkey in it talks, and every scene with the turkey in it is worth watching at least once.
Yeah. I think intent is a thing, and we all have different tastes and preferences too. So whether we either pick up on that intent or whether it just is something that totally doesn't resonate with what we enjoy, then that will determine our opinion on it afterwards.
Yeah, definitely. If the comedy on those bad movies doesn't pay off, it's just a bad movie at that point.
Yeah. I recently watched Isn't It Romantic with Rebel Wilson in it, and that one is like, it literally spells out the fact that they're taking they're exploiting or whatever rom-com movies. She said she goes through a whole diatribe about how terrible rom-coms are, and that her co-worker or her assistant at work is basically wasting her time at work watching them all. And so then obviously she goes through the typical stages of a rom-com. She knocks her head out and knocks herself out, and she goes through the thing. And it was just, I found it hilarious because it was obvious that was the intent that it had, and I just really enjoyed it for that. I just laughed at the stupidity of it, and I think they did it quite well.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And Luke said, she's such a bogan. Talking about Rebel Wilson? I think she's funny. Yeah. He was talking about her. In terms of taking the connections with movies and talking about them, and what are your hopes going forward for making connections in terms of like I don't know, reaching people or having those discussions around movies and sharing?
Well, I don't how I think that I've been making a consistent mistake with this podcast, and I've come to see it. It's that Twitter maybe is a hard place to engage in that, or maybe it isn't, and I'm just not quite committed to it. Maybe I use Twitter wrong. People say you got to be focused and only tweet about the thing, and that's not how I use it. I kind of tweet about or retweet mostly about everything.
Yeah.
Because it's almost me as a person kind of on the internet, and I like a huge number of things. So
yeah,
I think that's part of it, but I don't want to jump in and start like a Facebook group or anything like that. I mean, one thing that I do want to do moving forward is I don't know how to approach it yet per se. I've been kind of working that over in my mind, but I want to have this dialogue maybe with somebody or some buddies on the podcast itself, occasionally here and there, to kind of freshen it up, because I can yell into this microphone only so long before I tire of my own voice. And you'll hear it in the edit of the second American Graffiti episode, which is the length of 2 episodes, because I got so tired of editing and trying to remove all the random noises, and I'd let some through. I was just like, I don't care at this point.
I think it's hard when you do a solo show. But then on the other side of that, there are a lot of podcasts that are co-hosted, and it can get a little bit crazy and chaotic when people are getting excited about things and talking over top of each other and all of those other elements that happen. And so I think it would be interesting to have other people's perspectives and point of view and talking with you. And it's always great to connect. That's what I love about the Sunshine Summit. The opportunity to be able to talk with you is amazing. But I do love that it's at this point anyway, that it is your opinion and that there isn't sort of the other distractions perhaps that can sometimes happen in other ways of presenting it. So we try and let you know that when we're listening and what we thought, and I hope that happens more often. And I love just that there is a couple of places where we can hang out, like the channel of movies and shows, to have those sort of less formal conversations about what we're watching, whatever it is at the time.
For sure. Yeah. No, it's wonderful. Even to just talk about things outside of the podcast itself. I enjoy talking to people about movies, and sometimes at work we'll spend an hour talking about movies and be like, oh no, we have things to do, Yeah.
That's awesome. Do you know of are there particular resources that have helped you with the learning journey along the way, like apart from Podcastage and things like that? Are there any other ones that you want to shout out or point to?
Absolutely. So definitely Podcastage, which I started watching really early on. I remember when the room was mostly empty and things like that. So definitely helped me with the microphones and things like that. And then even still now, Better Podcasting, Sound Speeds, Booth Junkie. These are super good technical resources for things like podcasting and content creation. However, in terms of movies, I think that learning to make movies or learning the workings of movies is super important when you start to talk about them. And I definitely watch Film Riot and Rocket Jump Film School.
Okay.
And Rocket Jump, I watched Video Game High School. I watched all of the behind the scenes for that. I watched they did the Rocket Jump, the TV show on Hulu, and they also had behind the scenes for that as well. And it is wonderfully fascinating, and they are super funny, super creative, essentially educators at this point, and they're really good at what it is that they do.
That's
so
awesome.
It's not like I'm not showing up saying this is how you light a scene. Like, these are people that actually go on and do it on the day. They do it, 7 days a week, some weeks, and things like that. And they're very proficient, but also they use, especially Rocket Jump, they use their creativity, their built-in creativity, to help enrich the education experience for the most part. I mean, there are a couple of videos that are very straightforward, like follow a production assistant around for a day to understand what that means. Yeah. But in general, especially in the writing aspects and things like that, they are, and the sound, Kevin Senzaki is the, I guess, primary sound guy for Rocket Jump. And he is wonderfully talented and brilliant and creative. and an excellent communicator in terms of education.
That's awesome. And that it's so engaging, it helps sort of cement that in, and you pick things up and then you're able to apply that and add them to your vocabulary and how you discuss things, because it is amazing how much you do know about it. And there are so many things, so many elements that go into making a film.
I actually want to also call out the Script Notes podcast and the I believe it's called the Writers Room podcast. And the Writers Room podcast is primarily interviews with working writers and things like that. And Script Notes is two professional writers of some renown, especially John August, who created the Fountain.io format of script writing. And they really go kind of deep dive onto a lot of things. And then there's a couple of books, but Story by Robert McKee and Save the Cat, I don't remember the author right now, are pretty well known and well utilized resources in terms of screenwriting.
Yeah. Gosh, that's interesting. Can I ask you a question? Do you ever watch a film and not analyze it?
I'm not going to say no.
Okay.
But sometimes my brain is not in that mode per se. But it's come to the point now where I'm pretty much always looking for the setups and the payoffs and the story arc roughly and things like that.
Yeah.
But for me, that's one of the reasons that I do the podcast, is that I like movies so much that I need to know how they're made. Like, it's things like that. Like whenever I like something, I need to know how it works. I need to know deeper. So that's what I do. I just go further in.
That is awesome. That's what I love, because I don't have a big vocabulary on films. I love watching them, and some of them I will dive deeper into, because whether they have a meaning that does resonate with me, or we studied film in school, but that's as far as I took that. And then sometimes I'm able to just sort of let them wash over me and watch them, and then they're the ones that are terrible, and I think that was such a waste of my time. But I just wanted to know, because I know that you are so passionate about it. That's why you dive into it, because those are the things that you connect with, is the how, the structure, the everything that goes into it. And yeah, getting to hear that even about the films that I haven't watched, that doesn't taint my experience of it. It makes it richer, and I'm excited to watch films that I haven't seen, or even rewatch films that you've covered, again, knowing more from having listened to your podcast.
Awesome.
So that's what you've done for me. So thank you. I did ask.
Thank you. Like, this feedback is wonderful.
Oh, good. In the chat, I asked, what are your favorite movies? And Dean said Shawshank Redemption.
Oh, that is a spectacular movie.
Yes, it is. I agree. And he also really liked The Intern. There's so many. And Luke said Bullet. Is it Bullet? Is up there? Steve McQueen is Mr. Cool in that. I haven't seen that one.
Bullet is notable for its car chase. Primarily, I watched Bullet because I'm like, oh my god, the car chase. But the movie felt kind of slow and dated otherwise. But the car chase was really good.
Okay.
I do like car chase movies and car chases, and I have a bunch of those in my collection as well.
Yeah.
Not a bunch, because there aren't that many, but I have some.
Do you also have model cars, or just a model car?
I do. I have several. There's actually one. Let me see if I can. So in that case, right back there is I believe it's a 1968 GT 500, which I actually got from my wife.
Oh.
Right. She didn't give it to me. It was hers.
Yeah.
And we just have nowhere to put it. So she's big into Mustangs, and I actually got my Mustang initially because she had one at the time.
Cool.
And those were the newer ones that are kind of retro. And I was like, oh, they're gross or whatever. And then, we were dating at the time. She's like, oh, I'm sleepy, drive my car. And I drove it, and I instantly fell in love. I'm like, I love how this feels. And I went and I bought my own a month or two later,
That's awesome.
which I still have.
Cool. That is awesome. I love that connection story.
But I do have some model cars. I just don't remember what I did with them. I think I had to hide one.
Oh.
I gave one to my son, but I have another one down here.
That's cool. And so car chases are a thing. And so then how do you feel about the Fast and the Furious? Shall we just bring that one up?
Yeah, so this is awesome. a 57 Chevy Bel Air. It's like pretty rotted out, but you'll see it's kind of broken.
Oh no.
It's been away for a little while, but I'll fix it up.
Yeah.
So Fast and the Furious is definitely a dumb action movie. It's essentially a remake of Point Break.
Mm-hmm.
But I like the cars roughly.
Yeah.
There's definitely a stylistic choice on the cars that doesn't agree with everybody. But I think maybe one of the better Fast and Furious movies is Tokyo Drift, which has nothing to do with anybody else in the franchise.
Yeah.
Just because it was a simple movie with heart, and then it was just framed in Fast and Furious.
Cool.
But definitely that downhill racing and stuff like that is a very very renowned part of the culture in Japan. Like they had the anime Initial D and stuff like that, which season 1 of Initial D was very cool, because essentially a tofu delivery boy whose dad is like secretly teaching him how to race by giving him weird like instructions, like here's a cup of water, don't spill any water as you drive and stuff like that. So that's one of those things, whereas the Fast and Furious ends up becoming a crazy action franchise with The Rock like flexing out of a cast and things like that, which is fine.
Yeah.
And when you watch one of those movies, you know what you're getting into at this point.
Yeah.
So
Dean agreed Tokyo Drift is the best, and the glass of water, yes. Yeah.
Thank you, Dean.
And where was I up to after that? We watched Annihilation. That wasn't in your collection, but you've seen that. I've seen that one.
Yeah.
I think. And that one to me was interesting in the whole colors they used throughout it. There was a lot going on in that film, I thought. And then another one that was like kind of completely different is Polar, which we watched recently.
Yeah.
And I loved the way that you described that it was there was elements that went in together like a blender.
Yeah, definitely. Mother was really interesting. Mother, I felt, was in the same vein of Annihilation was in the same vein as Mother, right? That's why, because they're kind of mated in my mind, because I see them as similar and I saw them roughly close together, in that they are more movie than most movies.
Yeah.
And another resource, by the way, that I've seen is a channel on YouTube called Folding Ideas, and he can be a little pedantic about things, but he's generally not wrong. And his video on Annihilation is called "Embracing the Metaphor," and the movie was essentially all metaphor to me from the minute I started seeing it. Like the alien isn't necessarily a real alien, but it is more like trauma or issues and things like that, like guilt, because of how the relationship had shaped out and things like that. Whereas Polar was definitely a super fun action movie, and it had elements of other movies, it felt like, but all of these movies, including Polar, are actually comic book movies.
Yeah.
So Polar was a comic book or a comics internet comic, really, ultimately done by one gentleman, and he had a very graphic, and I know they're called graphic novels, but especially graphic, almost Sin City-esque approach with minimal dialogue and things like that. And it is reflected a little bit in the movie, and that's really cool. But there's a lot of violence as well and things like that.
Yeah.
So I think the movie hit all those beats.
I agree with you on that one. It wasn't quite what I was expecting, because I went into that one not really knowing too much, or not knowing its sort of back history there. But I can see the elements where it has done that, because there isn't talking. There are lots of scenes where it's just the camera moving across, or things like that, no dialogue. And then that, like right at the beginning, my heart nearly stopped with the dog. Like that had a huge impact on me when I was watching it. And there were moments where I wasn't sure that I could stick through that film, but I did, and I'm glad that I did. And with Annihilation, were you left thinking a lot after that film? Did it?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. I talked to everybody about it. I was like, what did you think?
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm glad that we have that similarity there, because some people would be just like, they'd give it a bad review or something. They wouldn't sort of appreciate all of the nuances or the metaphors or the everything else behind it. And Liberty Dude asked, what book do you want to see made into a movie? Which is a good comeback to that. You were saying you read a lot of science fiction and things like that. So is there anything?
That's going to be a bad response. He's not going to like it.
Okay.
My response is no book. None.
Okay.
My experience reading a book is is so, I guess, personalized that very rarely do I see it and be like, oh, that's what I was thinking. So it's one of those things where I've been hurt before, and I don't want to continue to be hurt. I know I'm going to get called out on this, but I'm a huge, or I have been for many, 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 many years, huge Lord of the Rings fan, and I do not like those movies.
Okay.
I think that they are technically spectacular. I think that Weta just destroyed it in terms of special effects and costuming and sets and all these things, and even CG as well.
Yeah.
But they did not feel the way that 9-year-old me felt reading those books. So my answer is kind of never. Stephen King's It is another really good one. I've read that book a lot. I read it the first time when I was probably too young to read it, but I did anyway.
Yeah.
And watching the movie, it seems like this very underpowered, kind of nerfed version, this pale shadow of the richness of the book, which dives in and out of timelines and things like that. And there's common through threads that'll bring you to 30 years ago or now. And you can't do that in a movie because it can be confusing to communicate that appropriately.
Yeah.
So it's one of the I wouldn't say limitations, but maybe differences of the medium.
Fair enough. On the flip side of that, I'll just get in this question. Is there a time when a movie has been better than the book? And I don't know if you've had that experience, but for me, like, I'm going to have an example, The Notebook by Nicholas Sparks or whatever. That book is, I find trash. It's terrible. But the movie, they did a lot better job at portraying the story. So, yeah, that might be just my personal opinion, but...
I was actually forced to read that book by my 8th grade English teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And I was very upset about it. And I had seen parts of the movie, and the movie feels, interestingly enough, pretty good as far as movies go.
Yeah.
But I would say that there's one notable exception, and it's not necessarily better per se, but it's definitely a different feel, and that is 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Okay.
2001: A Space Odyssey, the movie, is a very, very different feel than 2001, the book, even though they were kind of coming up and created at the same time. Stanley Kubrick notoriously kind of kept some things close to the vest, and Arthur C. Clarke in the book explains away. And they're almost two different things, even though they come from a common source material, which is Arthur C. Clarke's story.
Yeah. That's interesting. Did you read any of Dune? That series?
No. Oh, Dune?
Dune?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Have you seen the set?
I heard June. I was very confused.
Sorry.
Yeah, so I've read I think the first 4 Dune books, and I saw the David Lynch Dune.
Okay.
And it was definitely weird, but not better than the books. But then again, that's that weird, that rich sci-fi kind of tapestry that in my brain is so how it is, that to see it differently, I wouldn't feel okay about it. Even though Alexander Jodorowsky would have made a very interesting movie.
Yeah.
If you've ever seen the documentary of Jodorowsky's Dune, it still wouldn't have matched up per se. It would have been a different movie, similar to Kubrick's adaptation of 2001 and similar to Kubrick's adaptation of The Shining, which is from a source material, but maybe even better than the book.
Okay.
Due to his changes for the medium of the movie.
Yeah, that is very interesting. Dean said Regen Racing carved the mark, if you've read it.
I have never heard of it.
Okay. Maybe we'll have to look into that one.
I did see the Eric Bana documentary, Feed the Beast, about his not Commodore. What is his car? He has a normal Hoon car. Commodore. Love the Beast. Eric Bana.
Luke said
Ford Falcon. He has a Ford Falcon. That's right.
Nice.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Luke. And that was a very fun, interesting documentary. And I think that he paints the picture of the car guy like really, really well, except he has a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
but it was definitely a fun documentary to watch. It was very, I think, honest, very personal.
Yeah. The rich tapestry of things is something for me, like with that Dune series, is the books are the books. Nothing will ever sort of portray that the way that I imagine that to be, because there's a lot going on in those books. And I think one time, though, where it has been a little bit better is Diana Gabaldon. She wrote the Cross-Stitch series, or Outlander is the other name for it, and it became a series, and I really enjoyed the visual version of that, as opposed to sort of, I thought she got a little bit waffly in the books, but yeah.
Okay. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. The movie's definitely going to cut the fat out.
Yep. Yeah. But they have to. There's no way that you can dedicate as much as she put into a book, into a film.
In my opinion, sometimes they cut too much, and that's why I don't like them.
Yeah.
So, there's definitely that. But if you have a fatty book to begin with, maybe like okay, a good one is T.H. White's The Once and Future King versus Sword in the Stone, Disney Sword in the Stone. I've seen Sword in the Stone, and I love Sword in the Stone, but I started reading Once and Future King, and I hate that book.
Is that often that happens, that you come across one that you hate?
No. But once again, I kind of make informed decisions,
Yeah.
So that kind of keeps me in my own bubble sometimes, but talking to people and getting recommendations generally kind of opens that up.
Yeah. With the collection that you've got, have you got them cataloged, or like a list of them, or how do you know what you've got and things?
I want to say that I do somewhere, and I went looking for it, and I looked all of like maybe 4 or 5 minutes.
Okay.
And I was like, well, it's gone. But I kind of want to go through it again, because they were in alphabetical order. But the case is only kind of one way up, and it's been shuffled around in the move and things like that. Because we moved house actually over a year ago at this point, but it still feels like we've just moved.
Yeah.
And essentially everything kind of came undone in the case. So I want to go through that again. And then I have all my good movies, right? My special movies that I also need to catalog as well.
Cool. I don't have a catalogue of the films that I have, and I don't always keep track of the ones that I've watched. And I've seen people doing that more, keeping a record of it and keeping a little record of their thoughts on them, which I think is really important, because I've sort of got to Netflix even and gone, I don't know, but I think I've seen this before, and then I get through it and I'm like, oh, actually I have, and that kind of is a bit of a waste of time if it's something that isn't something I want to spend my time watching. So that's something that I want to do more in the future, is keep track of things.
Sure. Steph is heading out. Bye, Steph. Thanks for sitting with us. It's very interesting that you say that, and I wish I would have as well. But generally for things like movie, TV, music, I have like an insanely good memory sometimes.
Cool.
And so I usually at least get the emotional memory from rewatching a thing. And I've had a couple where my opinion has swung severely. A couple of people pointed out Swordfish earlier.
Yes.
And I came to realize upon my watching it for the podcast, I hate that movie.
I'm just waiting to see what the reaction there was going to be in the chat to that comment.
I didn't bring it up before, but I was like, okay, let's see what happens.
Yeah. And then we've got, wait, what? Maybe that's related to it. Dean said he uses an app called Hobie for keeping track of the TV series, so that sounds interesting.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah, I'm not sure what you do for that. Does it just, you add them in? And Luke said it would be nice if Netflix had some sort of big green tick on the stuff that you've already seen. It kind of gives you that sort of recommendation, based on this, you might like this. But I did notice that too. I kind of forget even then which ones I've seen on Netflix.
So if you rate an item on Netflix, when you come back to it, you'll see that you rated it. So that'll at least give you a breadcrumb.
Yeah, that is a good idea. Before we wrap up here, thank you everyone who's come by the live chat. Do you have any more questions for Mark or I before we go? And what is the plan for season 2? You have a plan? Season 2? I
do have a plan. I actually have all my shows kind of scheduled out. I haven't started them. I should have by now, but the crunch to finish season 1 was significant. but I do have them listed out. I'm playing with the idea of having some guests.
Yep.
I think it'll be fun. I think that especially people already in the podcasting space, they're almost predestined to understand the medium and how to handle it.
Yeah.
Versus just somebody kind of your friend from next door. But other than that, I think it's just going to be business as usual.
Mm-hmm.
I do have one question for you, Heather.
Yes.
Do you have a top list of like top 3, top 5 movies or rom-coms or action movies or horror movies or anything like that?
I do. So I like a whole breadth of movies, like a whole different range of genre, and my movies that I can come back to and watch over and over again. I know that Liberty Dude actually, I think it's Liberty Dude, or maybe it's Rags, who was in the chat in Discord, has sort of a list of movies that they go back to as well. But for me, I will watch Band of Brothers, that series, a lot. I loved We Were Soldiers with Mel Gibson. And I don't actually like war movies a lot. It's just those ones resonate with me on some deep and meaningful level. There's the part in We Were Soldiers when they're getting off the helicopter, and the song in the background is like Sergeant Malcolm. I don't know the title of the song, but it's like very eerie, and it just reverberates through me when it plays. And he basically says, I'm going to be the first one on the field and I'll be the last one off, meaning there's no one going to be left behind. He'll take them all with him. I like films like what's it called? The one with Robin Williams, and it's The Painting. It might be called The Painting, where his wife.
That is What Dreams May Come.
What Dreams May Come. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah, that is a gorgeous, gorgeous movie.
Yeah. I got to study that one in school, and I think I'd seen it before that, but I was so grateful to have the opportunity to dive into that more, because the themes in that one throughout and the way they do that is
definitely
hit home with me. Plus the art. My sister's really arty and creative, and I loved the use of the painting in there and just representing his heaven, which was awesome. And what else? Those are the main ones that come to the top of my mind.
I mean, Band of Brothers is huge for me personally as well. Like I bought it twice.
Oh yeah.
I haven't seen We Were Soldiers, but now I need to, basically.
That would be awesome if you did, and I would love to chat with you about it afterwards to see what you think.
Sure.
Yeah. I watched other Mel Gibson movies, and I mean, he's done a few different ones, and that one just stood out for me as a great all-round by everyone who was in that film. And Dean in the chat said Saving Private Ryan was awesome. And
definitely. Luke
said pre-Crazy Mel. That's kind of what I was getting at, that there were a lot of different Mel Gibson movies. Yep. But yeah. So I like watching films, and like I was saying before, sometimes I just let them wash over me. Like that Isn't It Romantic was a night where I wanted to let everything go, and I wasn't hung up on having something too serious or too scary. I do like horror films and thrillers and stuff like that. This year or last year, I enjoyed watching Hush and In a Quiet Place, and those ones were pretty powerful. So yeah, all sorts. Thank you so much for joining me today, Mark, for the Sunshine Summit and sharing your passion for movies and your podcast, Mark's Movie Collection. We had a great bunch of people in the chat. It was awesome to see you there. Thank you, everyone, for coming by. Check out Cool Mark D on Twitter, though, to engage with Mark there. If you're not part of the podcast's Discord server, he's also on Instagram at Cool Mark D, and check out scumbags.com. And yeah,
also on the Sunshine and Power Cuts Discord server.
Yes, you are. You're a part of mine. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. You can plug your own Discord on the Sunshine Summit. I mean, it's fine.
Oh, okay. Thank you. My stuff's there if you want to check my stuff out. I'd really appreciate it. But yeah, I'm grateful that we're connected, absolutely. Mark. I enjoy having conversations with you, and I really enjoy listening to your podcast. So thank you for
always a pleasure. Yeah, always a pleasure, Heather. Thank you so much. I'm truly honored.
You're welcome. No worries. I don't know what to say there. It's always awkward. I'm sorry.
It's fine.
We'll catch you all later. Thank you, everybody, for coming by today, and we'll see you for the next session of the Sunshine Summer. Bye.